everybody. My name is Stacy Jocelyn, and I am head of marketing here for WNS Denali. And I'm here today with two of our leaders within the HR and advisory services area. I have Lynn Rideout, who is the lead of our category advisory team, and Bobby Batista, who is the lead of our HR and talent management organization. And we're here today to talk about talent, one of the key topics for any company, large or small right now. And so I'd like to start out and just talk about an asset that we've just put out called the Talent Strategy Handbook, the Talent Handbook. And I want to talk a little bit about where this came from, and we're going to have a discussion around what it is, the importance of it, and really dive deep into some of the topics around the Talent Handbook. So first of all, welcome Lynn and Bobby. Thanks for joining here today for this conversation. And so, Lynn, I'd like to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about what the Talent Handbook is and what it includes? I know we have 4 I's as part of this. So tell us a little bit about those I's, what they are, and how the whole Talent Handbook came to be, if you don't mind.
Sure, no problem. I think the Talent Handbook came from a place that I'm hoping most people listening to this can relate to. It came from a number of questions that we started to get in the category advisory team and in our overall advisory team around, boy, I'm having trouble recruiting for my job description. It's been posted for a long time. Or, gosh, my team is missing some skills that they really need in order to tackle some of the new tasks that they're being given in the procurement world, and 1,000 other questions like that. So I think just based on our experience, seeing some of those questions, having those discussions, being at the forefront of thinking about some of the skill set growth and development of our client organizations, it just was a natural place to say, we have a point of view on this. We have experiences that we think are relevant to many organizations, and we wanted to put together some thought leadership around how do you identify the right talent? How do you really engage talent, and how do you make sure that that's a long-term value proposition, both organizationally and for the individual?
And so that moves across various areas of talent. Talent acquisition and management, right? We move from identify to involve, integrate, and invest, and those are the 4 areas of our handbook. I'd like to dive into a little bit, we're going to talk a little bit more about the identify space today, and ensuing conversations, we'll dive into those other 3. So what are the key concepts of identify as we really start out that conversation?
It used to be you put out, a job description, you get some candidates and you decide on the right one. I think we would all recognize that's gotten harder. It's gotten more complex, and it's gotten broader. So when we think about identify, it's really thinking about that special individual that we're looking to find and bring into our organization. But it's also making sure that that's a personalized experience, that candidates right now have a lot of different choices to make. They can think about working across not just, the town they happen to be living in, but multiple geographies, multiple types of work. So it's figuring out the way to make that, again, very personalized, very human focused, to say, how do we really present ourselves in a way that brings in the right talent, and thinks about that in a very collaborative way. It's not just, here's my procurement rec and I want someone to match it. It's thinking about that collaborative effort to say, how do I bring the best of what I know about my role and my team, or a client organization role and team. And then how do I think about, the best of recruiting, the best of our branding, and bringing that all together into one identify experience.
So it becomes a different conversation than we had around this in years past, correct? If I'm understanding this
Absolutely.
Correctly. And so when you pull all of that together, all of those really business needs around people, how does this become a conversation within recruiting for the company? Where does that begin? And Bobby, I'd like to direct that question over to you. How does that all start within the recruiting process, or even beforehand?
Yeah, I'm glad you're asking. And one really important piece to it that Lynn was talking about is really the partnership that happens between the hiring manager, the recruiting team, human resources, for one collaborative experience. And that experience really starts before we get to the job description. It really goes back to making sure that your employment brand is one that people are interested in joining. So oftentimes, and when we talk about how things used to be, you'd post, what you need or what the company does. And really the job, in the job market today, people are most interested in who you are versus what you do. So who are we as a company, and what type of experience are we going to provide for the people who come here? What are our core values? How do we like to operate? What's our culture? Those things matter, and getting those out front before you ever talk about how many years of experience somebody needs or what our detailed org structure is way more important. So really focusing on that, we find is very helpful for getting the right people to even come to the table before we find out if they have the right skill set.
So getting that whole concept together, that whole who are we and how do we portray ourselves as an organization, even before we think about the staffing?
Yeah, 100%. And that partnership continues, because then you need leadership to buy into that. What is that? The marketing team needs to understand it as they're advertising it. The hiring managers need to be able to articulate it when they interview. It has to be integrated and comprehensive and well-known. Because if you post on LinkedIn, it's one thing, and then they talk to Lynn, it's another thing, and they hear from me, it's something else, then we haven't done our job of creating what that employment brand truly is.
So it sounds like that's where internal communication really becomes very important.
Yes, absolutely.
And Lynn was talking about diversity. So the supplier diversity teams come into this, as well as the staffing teams. So then once we have that together, once we have that idea of how we represent ourselves, how does that speak to the process of finding out what our staffing needs are? Lynn, what are your thoughts on that?
I think taking a holistic view is certainly very important. So it is, to me, no longer a case of somebody left, I need to fill like for like, and I just, slot somebody in who has X years of experience, X skill set. I think it becomes a real holistic look of, what does my team look like? What does it need to look like tomorrow? What's the vision of my team? And how do I complement what exists? And really maybe even a bit of a look of, what's a required skill set that I just need, both hard and soft skills out of the gate, and where can I present a growth path, I guess I would say, to teach somebody something. Because I think similar to what Bobby said, people look for who somebody is as an organization, not necessarily what we do. So looking for, this is the mission you can be a part of. This is what we're looking to do. And this is how we grow people. This is how we evolve careers, I think is all kind of important. I recently had a case where someone sent me a job description saying, why am I not getting the right talent for this role? Or why am I not getting any talent for it? And in reading through it, there was really no excitement. There was really no vision around it. There was really no, this is what I get to be a part of. It was very kind of statistical in nature. I think just turning that on its head, going, what are the complementary skills that you're going to be bringing to the mission that we are on as a team, and just changing the wording a little bit, got a much bigger response, a much bigger level of enthusiasm. It goes back to that branding Bobby was talking about, both of the organization and of the team and of the role. So I think those are some of the types of things that we need to think about a little bit differently.
And how does that impact how we look at the traditional job description? Right. It seems to me that we're changing how we show up as a company when we're looking at recruiting, but how does that impact what we look for in a role, a job description?
I think this is a fast changing area within the procurement world in particular. So, I think things that would resonate in the past, you have to be, have X years of buying, you have to have X years of working with suppliers, or you have to understand how to write an RFX. Those things are still useful. Those things are still important. But I think more importantly, it's things like, how do you make analytical driven decisions? How do you build relationships with the business? How do you build a strategic view of where you want to take your category or your supplier relationship? What are efficient ways of doing procurement? Can you be a participant to weigh in on how to automate RFXs, or how to develop a supplier relationship program? These are all things that increasingly procurement organizations are being tasked with, and how you build those skills. It's not necessarily just continuing to incrementally pile them onto the same individual, but how do you think about the comprehensive team and saying, I've got analytical strength, I got relationship strengths, I've got the ability to influence a business decision on my team, and here are the pieces I'm missing, here are the pieces I'm strong at, and holistically, how do I build that great team? Because I'm asked to tackle more and more than ever before.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't necessarily always center perfectly in one person. That's a team, that's a collective mission that you're on.
Got it. Got it. And so when we're looking at a candidate, sometimes perhaps, correct me if I'm wrong, it might be a look at the how, as to how this person approaches, in addition to what that technical background may be.
Absolutely. It's how do I get my mission done? What do I need to have? What do I have already? And what am I looking for in the next person? And again, not just for today's ask, but what I think tomorrow's asks are going to be. And it may be balancing that a little bit. If I have a role that, used to be filled with someone who represented XYZ, but I had this great, soft skill driven person who has great relationship skills, great analytical skills, has a supply chain background, but still needs to learn some of the basic, maybe blocking and tackling. Can I teach that? Do I have a way of shoring that up, or building off of the great skills they're bringing in out of the door to really invest in that person and bring them along on our mission? So it is thinking about that a little bit differently, and thinking about what those skills are, and again, teachable versus, kind of must-haves.
Got it. And then finally, I think I'd like to come back to the whole concept of that internal communication, because everything we've talked about today really touches on that. And it's a question for either of you. What do you think are some of the key factors or the most important pieces of ensuring that you always have that cross-functional communication happening in this kind of new world of recruiting? What are some of the tips that you would have maybe for the listeners here?
I can start with that one, and I'm sure Lynn can add on. I think there's a couple of things. One is that open communication when you get down to actually hiring someone, between the hiring manager and the recruiter. Because as you know, people have all kinds of skill sets, as Lynn was talking about. And while I might have asked for one, nobody's ever going to be exactly like I asked for on paper. So without that communication, the recruiter's assuming I needed exactly what's on paper. With an open dialogue, we can tweak that. We might have found the soft skills Lynn was talking about. We might have found a hard skill that we didn't know was in there. And then it's a negotiation. What's the best fit? What brings about the best team? But it can't just be emails, a job description, whether the person fits or not, without that dialogue. So that's number one. And then the second one, I would say, on finding that diverse team. Diversity covers so many different avenues. And there's the diversity initiatives of the company. There's of finding the diverse team. So how do those all come together? What geographies should we be looking in? What avenues do we have that might not be the normal ones we'd be looking for to really uncover that talent? And then how does that tie to the exact job description? Were two that came to mind for me.
Yeah, I think the power around the collaboration is just immeasurable. And I think it's hard, though. I want to call that out. It's, when you're running 100 miles an hour and now you have a gap on the team or an incremental hire, it's easy to just, throw your requirements out there to recruiting and say, can you go find this? And then get annoyed when it's not perfect, or it's not, it's not coming fast enough, or whatever the case might be. I have learned simple conversations that happen over a period of time where it's just, I'm going to take the extra hour to say, let's get on a call and talk through. It's, this I can dial up a little bit more, this I can dial down. Hey, what do you think? Because, what geographies are we finding are really working well for us? What skill sets, are easier to find than others? Where do you think we might stumble? Just having that simple human conversation has been so helpful to me as I've built a team, and is so helpful when I see organizations doing that internally, to just have the conversation, use the best of everybody's brains. I know that sounds very kind of fluffy and simple, but so powerful. I do it all the time. I think Bobby and I have a lot of years of, I'm looking for this. It feels a little bit like, rainbows and unicorns. What should I think about? What should I do differently? How can I present this in a way that's interesting? I'm not the expert on that. I'm the expert on what complements my team. or what complements my client team. I am not necessarily the expert on the best way to get it done. So I have to, be thoughtful about that.
Got it. Got it. And perhaps the listening as well, right? We're listening to each other. And I think what you said before was really meaningful to me too, around listening to the candidates wanting to be part of something. So allowing that to influence what we're doing and how we're putting that out there as well, correct?
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Thank you both so much. It's a great conversation. Just for the listeners, we have a few more of these discussions coming up for each of the other 3 areas of the Talent Handbook. Those would be involve, integrate, and invest. And wherever this is published, there should be a link somewhere where you can access the full handbook that is co-authored by Lynn and Bobby. And highly recommend taking a read of that. So thank you both again for your time today. Very much appreciate it.